Chapter 11, Book of Revelation. Let's take a different angle of observation here and just simply look at the number 11 and see how highly relevant this is, looking at it from a different variable perspective. And we'll see that it all adds up to the original whole of information that we're talking about. The number 11 is known as the gate or the gateway, and for good reason. The gateway is representing the seal and how those that are behind its walls are trying to get through. They need to enter in through a gate. They need to enter in through an opening that's given them. And the opening that is provided is the trickery of mankind, to fool mankind into allowing them in, to get mankind to use his free will, to openly want these beings to come in our world and supposedly fix our problems, which are really the very same problems that they themselves have manifested originally in this world, that have just run rampantly, equationally into the distance and form the reality where we all now sit. So if number 11 is the gate, you have to begin to think about just simply how it looks. It looks like the two towers. And if we think about New York City in representation of 9/11, the terror, think about the two towers. These two towers is the representation of them trying to bring down the seal by trying to manipulate mankind's free will. And as we know, it's the supposed war on terror, but in reality, it's the war to bring this bringer of terror into our dominion. So by thinking about this number 11 as the gate and then the representation of these towers, you can immediately just begin to view some of the old prophets of the past, and you would see that they also continually make the same connection with these towers being brought down in the city as a part of the destruction. So we have to correctly fit this connection here with number 11 being a gate with what we see in chapter 11 itself for it to be truly fractally fulfilled. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump right on down. We'll talk about the whole chapter here in maybe another video. But as we look at verse number 8, I want you to see, and their dead bodies shall lie in the city, in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where our Lord was crucified. There's your key. There is your key. This is where the Spirit of Truth is going to begin to lead us to the fullness of understanding, to what, to most people's eyes, they're completely blinded to, completely, absolutely oblivious to. We need to understand a lot better about that great city, because it's going to be the very same great city of Revelation chapter 18 verses 21 and 22 that has this fire from the sky known as that flaming mountain of Revelation chapter 8 verse 8. And here we are at verse 8. And their bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually. Now we're looking for a city that is being spiritually defined in a figurative manner with the association of Sodom and Egypt simultaneously. It says where our Lord was crucified. So we're looking at a modern times reflective in a spiritual way, symbolically and figuratively, of the place where Jesus was crucified. Well, that immediately opens us up to the biggest truth that's going to connect us back here to chapter 11. This gateway that I'm talking about, and it's going to all come down to the very precise sight of the Spirit of Truth, which has been poured out upon all flesh, basically just dependent upon your personal capacity to receive. And this capacity to receive is based upon the amount of faith foundation that you have to support this vision. So check it out. It says, where also our Lord was crucified. So this city in modern times has to be reflective of Sodom, Egypt, and simultaneously with the place where the Lord was crucified. Well, automatically, so many people are going to say, Jerusalem. This has to be Jerusalem, because that's supposedly what they say it's talking about. Well, in reality, Jesus Christ was not crucified in Jerusalem. The laws of that city would not allow it, and Jerusalem itself was hardly considered a great city. So what we see is that Jesus Christ was crucified outside the city gates at a place called Golgotha, City of the Dead. Golgotha, City of the Skull. Now, hold your horses here for a moment. It's about to get real interesting. So we've got to have this city that's in representation of this city of the dead, this great cemetery that has these two big towers that are being symbolized as the gateway into our world, basically the entrance from the dead into the living, all connected just simply by the chapter and the number 11 as the gate, as it represents the two towers, which now is going to begin to represent perfectly this place of Golgotha, now known in modern times as New York City, this city of the dead. So we're looking for this understanding of Golgotha to be connected to a gate, and we need to see it perfectly. And for that, we go to the thesaurus. And I've already pre-looked up Golgotha, and it has brought me right here: graveyard, burial ground, cemetery, boneyard, necropolis, polyandrium, Golgotha, memorial park. Wow, doesn't New York City got a memorial park? City or village of the dead, a marble city, churchyard, God's acre, Potter's field, Golgotha, Calvary, Lichgate. Lichgate. Lichgate is the gateway through a cemetery. In other words, this gateway that we see, those coming from the land of the dead trying to enter into the dominion of the living. Golgotha is associated with a gateway. Golgotha is the gateway for them to break the seal, which is associated with the very death of Jesus Christ, which is associated with the death of the believers of Jesus Christ. It's associated with trying to stamp out the residual memory and faith belief of Jesus Christ in the children of God. So as we go down further, number 15, we begin to continually talk about the similarities here with the association of this graveyard gate Golgotha. And now we instantly manifest to the thing that happened to New York City in this area of destruction of the first cup when the two towers came down. What have they called it now? It's a monument. It's a marker. It's a memento. It's a shrine. Notice now that we enter into the word stone. Right? Because that's exactly what's coming for this place. After it's been made this monument, this marker, this memento, here comes the millstone, and it's all fractal complete. The millstone is supposed to bring about the gravestone and the tombstone and the headstone and the footstone for the many believers of Jesus Christ, of which you'll see quite appropriately fit into the Iraqi dinar, where it shows this Lion of Judah and therefore the believers in the Lion of Judah being beheaded. Basically all by this breaking of the seal that we see this serpent right here is bound in. And you all should understand that quite well. So don't let none of that go over your head here for a moment, because we even begin to get into the pillars. Now, if you're understanding the pillars, you got to start thinking about the two pillars, and then you got to start thinking about Jashin and Boaz, and then you got to start thinking about that archway that I showed you with the connection of Cancer and the Pleiades, which begins to represent the manifestation and fulfillment of that drawing that I got from 20 years ago that shows the opening of this gate, this birthway, from the etheric realms. Basically the exact same thing that we're talking about right here. And you can all find that in the video series entitled The Arrival of the Locust. So there we have it. Incredible. So we got to see the rest of the connections here, and then I'll show you the connections as they reflect in Isaiah 34, and then I'll tell you what exactly this is all about here. We have got to understand some very important connections here about this city and its figurative descriptions. Now we've covered the description of where the Lord was crucified, and we've known the association of Golgotha, but I haven't told you probably the biggest shocker of all as it connects New York City as this Golgotha. Did you know that off the coast of New York City, in a place called Hart Island, which you can immediately connect to Job chapter 41, talking about the heart of the Antichrist is as cold as a piece of nether millstone. The heart, and then we knowing that this is to create a blood sacrifice to pump the heart of this AC and get him materially living into our world. In essence, it's the vampire that needs the blood to walk about the living. He wants to become the day walker, no longer to be the night walker, just like you see being portrayed in the modern ambitions within these vampires from their movies. They need to be day walkers. They need to be day walkers in the dawn. They've been waiting for this dawn so that they can be their free occultic selves openly amongst us, and that we can't have this dominion over the world, which they themselves are seeking in a deceptive manner. They don't want us to be able to be free. They need to seek to try to control and rule over us. So the city, we have to see the figurative descriptions between Sodom and Egypt. Well, that's a perfect fulfillment of New York City in the most simplest way before we get to complex, is that New York City is known for its debauchery. It's known for its treachery. It's known for its lewdness, its crudeness, and its perversion, just like Sodom. And then also, New York City is known just like Egypt in a figurative manner because of its architecture, its great architecture, its education, the very same things that Egypt was known for. It was known for knowledge. It was known for great buildings and great architecture. So you have to begin to see this figurative fulfillment of this spiritually modern city, which has been prepared and created with all of these symbolisms and these defined manifestations with these city representations that we see in chapter 11 of Revelation. So now we need to make a real quick comparison to what we saw in Isaiah chapter 34. And this was what I forgot and kept on trying to refer to as Judea in the previous video. We're talking now about, in reality, Idume. That's what I was trying to remember when I kept saying Judea. But it still fulfills as they're trying to destroy the believers in Judah, just like we saw here on the Iraqi dinar. And don't take this thing lightly here. Let me just simply show you how this city stuff connects up a little further. We're talking about a sacrifice on a curse. Okay, it shall come down upon Idume and upon the people of my curse. So this Idume is a representation of a particular peoples that are cursed. Now Idume is a unification of the land of Judea and Edom. Basically, Edom represents Gentiles, and it's what Israel calls Gentiles. Now, you remember, Israel rejects Jesus Christ. So anybody that is the believer in Jesus and not their God-in-law of Yahweh is considered a Gentile. This is the curse of the people that are represented as Judea is Edom. Or in other words, these people of the believers of the house of Judah are the Gentiles. And if you want to understand why they're trying to get rid of the believers of the house of Judah, you would have to view a video series that I did entitled Ephraim and Manasseh, USA, UK, and you'll see in Genesis chapter 48 and 49, again, the proclamation that they are trying to get rid of the rule of the scepter from Judah, and that they're trying to put it in to the descendancy of Jacob's hands. So this Idume now fulfills itself as Judah and Edom brought together as their Gentiles, the people of their curse. And it's going to fulfill itself incredibly right here where it says, "For the Lord hath a sacrifice in Basra." So that's exactly where the sacrifice is going to take place. It's going to take place against this particular people of Idume, the ones that they believe are the Gentiles, at this location that is going to be figuratively known, just like we saw the location was figurative in chapter 11, as Basra. Here's how this Basra is going to fulfill itself as the figurative manifestation of the created city that's going to unify itself with these figurative descriptions of Sodom and Egypt. We've got to think now about Basra and one particularly startling fact. Basra had the largest Iron Age buildings. The entire Iron Age, Basra had the largest buildings. And in reference and the association with Egypt having the largest structures built by the hand of man, representative of the top 10 around the world, we're talking about figurative symbolic descriptions of a city of a very great stature that has very great iron buildings. So this representation of this figurative city of chapter 34 of Isaiah is the very same figurative representation of this description of this city in Revelation chapter 11 verse 8. Now, Golgotha being the city of the dead, you can't overlook the fact that New York City has the largest commercial, now we're talking commercial Babylon, right? It's the destruction of commercial Babylon. New York City has the largest commercial cemetery on the face of the earth, and I said, right off the coast in Hart Island.